Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football Christmas coming early for Hugh Freeze in the Auburn Tigers early Monday morning. I'm drinking my cup of coffee, and this is what pops up on the timeline. Former Georgia Tech wide receiver Eric Singleton Jr. committing to Auburn. A couple of things that came to my mind immediately, and I think it starts with how many wide receiver rooms are we taking over Auburn heading into 2025? I think we're looking at one of the better pass catching rooms we see in the country. And you go back to 2023 when Hugh Freeze took over this program from Brian Harsin. Auburn might have had the worst wide receiver room in the SEC in 2023. It gets better in 2024. It is going to be one of the better units in the country going into 2025. And you look at Hugh Freeze and Auburn, what they're thinking heading into 2025. I wouldn't say took a massive risk, but are definitely betting on some upside with Jackson Arnold. We know he's not the most proven commodity at the quarterback position that was available in the portal, but he was a quarterback that offered a lot of upside, significantly more upside than a lot of other quarterbacks we saw in the portal. And I think Hugh Freeze said, hey, let's bring in Jackson Arnold, give ourselves exposure to potentially a very good quarterback in 2025. But if we do this, we got to make sure we're giving him all the tools necessary to have a ton of success in 2025. That's exactly what Auburn has done. I mean, you look at grabbing a guy like Eric Singleton, you look at grabbing a guy like Horatio Fields, you look at grabbing two of the better offensive linemen that we saw in the transfer portal. To me, I look at this and say that all the pieces are coming into place for Jackson Arnold and this Auburn offense heading into 2025. Now it's about just going out there and putting it on the football field. But I give Hugh Freeze a ton of credit for saying, hey, we're going to bring in Jackson Arnold and we're going to die trying, putting around the best pieces we can heading into 2025. They've certainly done that. Now, how does Eric Singleton work into this Auburn wide receiver? And what is this Auburn wide receiver going to look like in 2025? That is starting to get to be a very fascinating conversation. Before we get into it, as always, to the Auburn fans, it's been a blast talking this program the last couple of weeks and what Hugh Freeze has done in the transfer portal. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the boys continues to be amazing. Appreciate you guys. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, I want to start with Eric Singleton. I want to talk about what this wide receiver might look like in 2025. And you get into Eric Singleton, I first think you talk about how easy he is to get involved in the offense. I think what makes Eric Singleton so special, and you see it reflected in all the production he's had his first 2 years at Georgia Tech. One, that Georgia Tech offense was, kind of predicated on the run game. And Eric Singleton emerged as this difference maker that, hey, we got to get involved in as many different ways possible. Like, our offense is better when he has the football in his hands. And Georgia Tech used him in a ton of different ways. To me, that's where it starts. Eric Singleton's one of those wide receivers that is so easy to get involved in your offense. Whether it's working vertically down the field, getting behind the defense in the deeper third, whether it's taking a screen and just being an animal after the catch, whether it's separating in those short intermediate route trees, there's nothing really Eric Singleton can't do, which I think it's important because a lot of other wide receivers that you saw in the transfer portal, think a guy like Nick Anderson coming from Oklahoma. Nick Anderson, damn good football player in 2023. As of right now, kind of a one-trick pony. Nick Anderson, just a guy that is big, he's fast, and he can work vertically down the field. There's not a ton else he can do within the offense right now. And I'm not saying Nick Anderson won't be able to do some of that stuff as he progresses, but currently was kind of a one-dimensional wide receiver. You can't say the same for Eric Singleton. Eric Singleton's a guy that, I can work vertically down the field. I can go attack the deeper third, but I can also be extremely dynamic with the football in my hands. I can also be a route runner that's creating separation on third downs to move the chains because of how multidimensional he is, and you can really line him up anywhere you want. I mean, 30% of his snaps in the slot, another 70% out wide. You can do anything you want with Eric Singleton, which kind of matters for Auburn, considering how loaded this wide receiver room was going to be, whether Eric Singleton was on this roster or not. If Auburn wanted to add an elite wide receiver, they wanted to add a guy that can be multidimensional because there's a lot of talent in this wide receiver room. And you start getting into, what this wide receiver room is going to look like. I think you have that 1A, 1B wide receiver duo in Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton. And what I love most about those two is, what does Cam Coleman do best? He's a big body that's really, really fast that can work vertically down the field. Okay, what does Eric Singleton do best? He's not as big as Cam Coleman, but he's extremely dynamic with the football in his hands, can really thrive in those short intermediate route trees. So I look at Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton and say, not only might be, they are two of the best wide receivers in the country heading into 2025, they also balance each other out really well. They don't do the same things. They can get involved in different ways. So I look at that wide receiver duo and say, I don't know how many you'll find that's better in the country heading into 2025. And then you start mixing in, Horatio Fields, a guy that is just a riser at the wide receiver position. Now, can he translate the production from the ACC to the SEC and kind of build on what he did at Wake Forest? That's the question. But I think Auburn feels pretty damn good that Horatio Fields can do that. And then you got Malcolm Simmons, who I think might be one of the most underrated true freshman wide receivers in the country. Doesn't get nearly enough of attention I think he deserves because he's playing with the guy in Cam Coleman, who's just kind of a special talent. Malcolm Simmons, in terms of being electric with the football in his hands, yeah, he can be that guy. And then you talk about Perry Thompson. Maybe not as day one ready as Cam Coleman was. You kind of get a feeling he's going to be very dynamic for Auburn in 2025. You sprinkle in a guy like Bryce Kane. I mean, it's 5-6 wide receivers that can be legitimate difference makers for you in 2025. I look at it and say, if you are a defensive coordinator and you're trying to take away all this firepower, you really can't. It kind of reminds me of some of the Ohio State wide receiver rooms that we've seen in the past, where when you have 3-4 all-conference wide receivers, it's really easy to find your matchups. When you're playing an SEC team any given Saturday, they might have one defensive back. They might have two defensive backs that they feel really good about putting on your top wide receivers. Do they have 3, 4, 5? That's kind of the question. And you're going to need that if you want to take away all the firepower that Auburn has coming in going into 2025. You look at what Auburn's done in the 20, and I'm just a massive fan of how Hugh Freeze is constructing this roster. I mean, this is back-to-back years of, top 10, top 5 high school recruiting classes and top 10, top 5 transfer portal classes. To me, that's a sweet spot. You don't want to be over-reliant on the transfer portal like we see other programs, but you also want to make sure you're using the portal successfully. Hugh Freeze has built a roster that, yes, it underperformed. The one knock you have with Hugh Freeze is that it felt like in 2024 that team maybe underperformed given the talent that they had. If you can maximize this talent heading into 2025, I truly believe that Hugh Freeze has built a roster that from a talent standpoint can compete at the highest level of the SEC. And that's for college football fans who've been following the sport their whole life. That's a prerequisite. That's table stakes. If you want to compete at the highest level, you got to have that baseline talent. You got to put it together in the fall, which we'll wait and see if Hugh Freeze can do. But at the very least, if you want to have a chance to compete at the highest level every single Saturday, the talent needs to be in a certain spot. It wasn't even close to that with Brian Harsin. You look at going into year 3 for Hugh Freeze and say that this is a roster that can compete at the highest level. And I'll say, what if Jackson Arnold, in a new situation with a significantly better team and better pieces around him, what if Jackson Arnold reaches that 5-star ranking he had coming out of the 2023 class? You're looking at a team that's going to be very hard to beat on Saturdays, every single Saturday. I'm really excited. Again, you look at this team and say that this is an SEC championship caliber team from a roster talent standpoint. Now we wait and see if Hugh Freeze can go execute it Friday or Saturdays in the fall. They might not even be done yet. Hugh Freeze is showing very clearly this is the year we want to push our chips in to go win in 2025. we'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys more than y'all know. And we'll talk to you guys later. Peace.